Welcome, everybody. This is our spring Community Wellness Division meeting. And for many of you that are recent hires, you don't even know who this person is up there talking at you, right? So my name is Joanne Hoganson, and I'm the Division Director for Community Wellness. And I'm very happy to have you all here this morning. Welcome especially to our new hires. I have a list. I'm going to read your name and introduce you in a few minutes. And my goodness, the list is like half as long as the entire Community Wellness. We've had a lot of turnover. To start off with, it is recommended that you wear a mask, okay? And that is because we're all crowded into this room, except for these empty chairs up here. So if you're a little afraid of coronavirus, please feel free to come sit up here. Couple of announcements to start our meeting. First of all, I would like to let you know that an updated flex schedule will be coming out attached to the division director email that goes out the first of every month. There's not a lot of significant changes in it. It's really a couple wording is changed. Other than that, the content is exactly the same. And hearing and vision text, you have some guidance specific for you. But for the most part, there's no significant changes, but please review it because sometimes we forget what it says and then we're not necessarily following it carefully. Next, I have an announcement regarding naloxone. Many of you know that we provided free naloxone given to us by the state of Michigan for any employee, especially those of you that are out in the community. You never know when you might need it. And so it was free, but if you look on the box, it's also expired. So please, it's probably still good. It'll probably work just fine. But, so if between now and the time you turn it in, you have a need for it, please use it. But there is a box back here. You can turn in your old naloxone and we will destroy it and you can pick up a new box, okay? And if people have asked me, I have an uncle or I have a client or I have a neighbor, please, the more naloxone we get out into the community, the better. So please take more than one. Yes, Kathy?
Are there like temperature restrictions for storing? Can you leave it in your car? Is it too hot?
You can leave it in your car. Extreme temperatures probably isn't a great idea. However, I've left mine in my car this whole time. It's been in my glove box. So very good, thank you. For those of you that are carrying or distributing naloxone, we think that's great. I have two people I would like to introduce this morning before we get into our welcome of new employees, and one of them just walked in the door, so I think I'll start with him. Good morning. For those of you who don't know, this is Al Vandenberg, and he is our county administrator, new to the job. I'm going to hand you the mic here in a minute, Al. Yeah, that works. And I thought you would all like to see his face and have an opportunity to meet the boss's boss. So this is Al Vandenberg, and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Wow, we're down here, and COVID's almost over, right? God, I was so sick of it, right? But you're way more sick of it than I am even. But wow, good morning. It's nice to meet you. So people ask me, how long have I worked for Kent County? And I say, well, let's see, 5 years and 2 months, because I'm the time capsule county administrator. I was here as a deputy administrator for 4.5 years. And then I went to Ottawa County to be the county administrator for about 17.5, just over that, and then back here. So why would I come back here? I was really comfortable at Ottawa County. We did a lot of change. I love my job. But you know what? There's a lot to be done here. Kent County is a great organization, and I'm here to work with all of you to do what we can to take it to the next level. And so I'm going to be talking soon about what I call the 6 C's Organizational Improvement Initiative, and we'll do some things like Disney Way customer service training like we did at Ottawa. We're going to kind of assess where we're at with lean and innovation kind of thinking and try to take that to the next level and look at collaboration. And so there's just a whole number of areas where we're planning to focus on to I don't know, could it be Kent 2.0? Am I Kent 2.0? I don't know. Maybe I am. So you'll be seeing more of my face, which is maybe good or bad. My mom always said I had a face for radio, so. But I'm going to be starting something that really worked well at Ottawa County. when I got there back in late December of 2003. There are just a lot of employee issues that thankfully we don't have here to start with. But what I did is I started doing brown bag lunches. So I figured, you know, most people are going to eat at lunchtime. And so I would go to 8 different facilities 3 or 4 times a year and just sit down and have lunch with employees. And anybody's invited to come. I usually bring a couple staff, maybe some people you haven't met yet. And then we do brief updates and maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then I want to hear what's on your mind. And then we have a discussion, and usually it's about an hour, and we all move on to the rest of our day. So you'll be getting an email, probably even today. So you got the email about our security being violated. So I said, you know what, HR, you send that out today. I'll send out the brown bag one tomorrow. So, you know, to keep things in balance. So I said, nobody likes you guys anyway. No, just kidding, just kidding. So, and then there's other just big things happening in Kent County externally too. So you'll probably note that we had a busy week on the board last week. As a member of the Convention Arena Authority with Grand Rapids, the city and the county both have to approve anytime the Arena Authority wants to buy land, like they want to buy 201 Market from the city to put the 12,000 seat amphitheater on, or if they want to lease land, like they want, or lease a facility, like they want to lease 20 Monroe Live from its new owners and run it. And so the board voted on those things. Plus, we got an approval to put in an application to buy Cannonsburg, which sounds kind of a weird thing. We don't want to run a ski lift, but we also don't want sand and gravel mining companies to buy it and make a lake and then sell $500,000 homes around it. And then what have we accomplished as a community? We don't have our West Michigan ski hill anymore, and we haven't really attacked the affordable housing on top of all that. So, so I think you only gave me like an hour, right?
You're making me nervous.
Okay. Well, I just wanted you to see my face and say hi, and we'll have a lot more engagement. The frustrating thing for me is I like to be visible with employees. I like to hear what you're thinking. I want to know your concerns. I want to know what you're happy about. We will have the brown bag lunches, and we'll interact there more. And with that, I'll turn back over the mic so she's not nervous anymore. and I actually have to get to a meeting.
Okay, so no time for 1 or 2 questions.
Oh, sure, yeah.
1 or 2 questions from the group now?
In fact, we can do that.
Right in the back, Annette.
So why did it take so long for us to find out that we've been compromised?
Because it took that much time for us to figure out what was really going on.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we had our attorneys, we had HR. It wasn't really clear what it was and who might be impacted and all that. So that was the main reason, and then finding out right before the weekend and trying to figure that out was all part of that. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
Hey, is my former student here? Any of my former students? You're embarrassed now. All right. I teach on the adjunct faculty at Grand Valley, and I have several students that work for Kent County and Ottawa County and other local governments. So.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Al.
You can find me by email if you have any questions you didn't want to ask in front of people. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, and welcome to the county.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the county, yeah. We also have Olivia Pena here with us today. Olivia, come on up. As all of you know, our county has a real emphasis on health equity and diversity, and we have hired a full-time person to take the leadership in that, and I'd like to introduce Olivia to tell us a little bit about what she will be doing.
Hi, my name is Olivia Pena. I'm the health educator or health equity coordinator for the Center for Community Health Strategies. And just a little background about my role. So health equity is a really big issue in Kent County, really all over, but so it just is a really complicated issue with a lot of roots. And so one of the goals of Community Health Strategies right now is to really look at it from a community perspective and really get community voice to make sure that the issues that we're addressing are really community-based and focused there. So my role really is about engaging voice, really encouraging participation, really just building and maintaining those relationships with our community to make sure that the communities most impacted by our disparities are the same ones that are getting to choose what we focus on. And since health equity really does touch on really any health issue, anywhere from STIs to maternal health to mental health, just really making sure that whatever issues that we're focusing on really have a health equity focus. So I'm really excited to meet all of you. I know I talked a lot about how my role will be focusing mostly external parties, but I'd imagine that I'll be kind of working with all of you to get your idea about how you feel health equity is going within, your department, and, hopefully some future collaboration. So it's good to meet all of you, and thanks for having me.
Great.
That's about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's welcome Olivia. We have some other people to welcome, and those are new employees. And because we haven't met as a Community Wellness Division for a very long time, by the way, this is our Community Wellness Division quarterly meeting, which we're going to do 3 times this year. So quarterly, but 3 times. This is the winter, spring put together, okay? We had to cancel the winter meeting because the COVID numbers were really high. So we're blending the two. And our speaker that we had today is actually scheduled last January, but we had to change it because of COVID. So I have a very long list of people to introduce. When I call your name, and I apologize ahead of time if I mispronounce, when I call your name, please stand up, and I'm going to, first of all, talk about MIHP North. MIHP North, that would be Erica Wamser. Where's Erica? There she is. Erica, welcome. Whitney or Mattinger? Whitney, are you? Oh, there she is. Beth Hendrick. Yay. Beth, am I introducing you the second time? Feels like it. Okay. Brianna Wallfield. Brianna, this can't be your second time. It's only day 3 of your employment here. So, Brianna, welcome. Happy to have all of you. These are all home visitors from the North team. MIHP South, Natalie Carlson is out ill. Regan Barsh. She's on vacation. Does anybody actually work here? Ebony Miller, also brand new, just started on Monday. Ebony is a social worker and she's on the MIHP South team, reporting to Renee. Ebony comes to us all the way from across the parking lot at Network 180. You didn't have any trouble finding our way to work today? Okay, good. Children's Special Healthcare Services has 2 new employees. They have been around for a little while, but maybe you haven't met them yet. Anna Durr, are you here? Yay, Anna. And then there's a face that's probably pretty familiar to you if you have ever gone down into clinics, and that's Vienne Taliana. When I was first hired here about 14 years ago, I met Vienne like the first week, and she was expecting a little baby, and that baby is 14 now. So good to have Vienne as part of our Children's Special Group, and Anna as well. Hearing and Vision also has 2 new employees, Ana Carrillo and Amy Malback Cronin. Amy and Anna join our Hearing and Vision team and are already up and screening like crazy. Strong Beginnings has 2 new employees. Kertrice Mansoret is not able to be with us today, but she's a new community health worker. And Claudine Mujawamalia. Welcome, Claudine. Happy to have you on board as a community health worker as well. Nurse Family Partnership has 3 new people. One of them is probably really familiar because she's been around for quite a while. Chelsea Howard. Yeah, Chelsea. Chelsea, I may have introduced you in the past too. At the last one too. That's all right. You're worth 2 introductions, Chelsea. Vika Clays. Nice to have Vika and Sophie Guazdakis. 3 new nurse home visitors in Nurse Family Partnership. Medicaid enrollment, many of you have asked about when are we going to be doing Medicaid enrollment again. Well, we have a new Medicaid enrollment specialist. Her name is Ash Pharma. Happy to have Ash with us. She's already doing a fantastic job entering MIHB referrals and will begin very soon to be enrolling people in Medicaid as well. And we have a new lead outreach worker. She's been with us for a few months now, a half-time outreach worker, and her name is Nancy Ruiz Calderon. Wow. So if you look around and say, I don't even know these people, who are these teammates of mine? It's because there's been a lot of turnover, and we're very, very happy with all the new employees. Please go out of your way to get to know these people. Getting to know them, making them feel welcome. I like to think of us as we're a tribe, and you're part of our tribe. So a tribe looks out for each other, a tribe protects each other, a tribe gives you a sense of belonging. So look around, this is your tribe. Now let's move on to some really cool achievements. Let's start with our refugee team. Michelle Allenbass and Kathy Blake, would you stand? Michelle Allenbass and Kathy Blake did fantastic work during stressful time with the assistance of Amy Trick, Kathy Zacharias, Laura DeVries, providing health screenings to Afghan refugees. Josh Potter developed a system to track appointments and documents needed to complete the screens. Everyone that works for or related to the refugee team, please stand up. You guys really deserve. They deserve special kudos. When we found out that how many refugees from Afghanistan were all coming at the same time in a very short amount of time, they really rallied, stepped up to the call. So special thanks to our refugee team. Norma Salgado, where are you, Norma? She's in a school. Could you call her? No, I'm kidding. Norma Salgado developed a new Medicaid billing system for the H&V program, which ensured greater accuracy and a higher number of claims being paid. So congratulations to Norma. Nurse Family Partnership. Chelsea Howard completed her training as a certified lactation counselor. Congratulations to Chelsea. Maddie Hall was chosen to be a member of the Kent County Family and Children's Coordinating Council. Maddie, why don't you stand up, Sullivan? Great. This is a really cool one. Katie Haynes, why don't you stand up so we know what we're talking about? She is on vacation. Okay, so when you see her, you can congratulate her on this. Katie Haynes has recently served 2 different women who recently lost their husbands and were faced with what loss means for income, housing, and support. In both cases, neither client knew about survivor benefits. Katie was able to assist these clients in navigating the application process. In a great moment of a loss, Katie was a beacon of hope. So. HEP, Health Education and Promotion. Angel Rodriguez delivers the Yo Puedo program in English and Spanish to students in middle and high schools. This year, Angel is delivering more student education than he has in the past 19 years. To enhance the Yo Puedo program, Angel is offering educational sessions to the parents of his students as well, lasting a total of 6 hours, 3 sessions at 2 hours each in English and in Spanish. Angel, why don't you stand up and... That program has a special little space in my heart, you know? Yo Puedo. Okay. Carolyn Quiney serves as the Tobacco-Free Michigan Board Chair at the state level and Kent County Tobacco-Free Network Coordinator at the local level. Ask Carolyn anything about tobacco, vaping, or the menthol ban. So, Carolyn, where are you? Oh, right here in the front. Carolyn, why don't you stand up? I think most of you know who Carolyn is, but... Carolyn is our tobacco guru, so happy to have here. And now we have 3 people that have service pins. Amy Clark, come on up. And while we're working on that, Amy Trick, come on up. And Sharon Schmidt. Amy Clark has completed 15 years of work at Kent County Health Department. Congratulations, Amy. Amy Trick has completed 20 years at Kent County Health Department. And Sharon Schmidt has completed 25 years. I can't get it. Congratulations, Sharon. Great. All right. At this time, I am going to pass the mic to our presenters today. We have invited two people from Bethany Christian Service to educate us about Afghan refugees, their culture, and whatever we need to know to be able to provide the most culturally competent and best services to our newest neighbors who are from Afghanistan. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So our presenters from Bethany Christian Services, welcome.
Thank you. All right, good morning. My name is Caitlin Jackson, and I have been at Bethany for about 5 years now. I was in our complex medical case management program, the Preferred Communities program, so I have already been very familiar with many of you through that program. And then when everything happened in Afghanistan and Bethany created a new program called the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program, I took over supervising that program for us. So that's why I'm here today. And then I am very excited to introduce to you Samir Bayan, who came on as our Afghan case manager in January. So I'll let him quickly introduce himself.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samir Bayan. And for the first time, I was in States like in 2019 for my grad school. And then shortly after my graduation, I joined Bethany Christian Services as an Afghan case manager. And it's almost 3 months that I'm working with the Bethany in Grand Rapids. Thank you.
All right, so many of you have probably heard or seen that there was a huge influx of Afghans coming to West Michigan. So we're hoping that this presentation today will just give a little bit more context for why that happened, if you're not aware, and then give you some more information about Afghan culture and working with people from Afghanistan to equip you to do your work well. All right, so go to the next slide. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, I'll start by just giving you an overview of the Afghan arrivals in West Michigan and more context for that. We'll go over some misconceptions about Afghanistan and then talk about the reality. We'll talk a little bit about the history of Afghanistan and just some demographics. And then Samir will be talking a lot about culture, holidays, food, religion, mannerisms, to give you some more context. And then we'll talk about some interaction tips to help you all as you're engaging with this population. And then we'll talk a little bit about some health considerations that might be uniquely important for you to understand. And then if we have time at the end, we're going to just kind of briefly touch on women's rights, as that's something that has a complex history in Afghanistan. All right, so then moving on to Afghan arrivals. So if you watch the news at all, you probably are familiar with the fact that at the end of the summer of last year in July, August, news started that the U.S. was withdrawing our presence, or really just all of the West was withdrawing their presence in Afghanistan, and soon after that, the Taliban took over control of the country. So in that entire process, there were many Afghans who knew that they would not be safe and needed to evacuate. That process looked a little bit different than maybe other evacuation or refugee situations that you might be familiar with, and that many people fled to the airport and got on airplanes with the help of the U.S. and other countries to evacuate that way. I'm not going to go into all of the complex political reasons why that happened, but the U.S. felt that we needed to help people who are in direct danger because of their relationship with us, essentially. So many of those Afghans were put on planes and brought directly to the United States and put on military bases throughout the U.S. Others were put on military bases around the world. And so Starting in September, West Michigan started to receive those individuals who had been brought from Afghanistan to the U.S. They had gone through screenings and a security process, and once all of that had been completed, they were released to come to West Michigan, which is going to be their new home. When they were on the base, they had comprehensive medical examinations. Those examinations and documents were shared with us and then shared with the refugee team at the health department so that they could continue on. It's like, this isn't part of the presentation. So that's kind of what brought them here. Once they got here, at first, there was a lot of conversation that this population would be very different than other refugees and that they wouldn't have access to a lot of the same benefits, such as Medicaid, cash assistance, food assistance through the state. Thankfully, Congress acted and quickly passed legislation to allow them to have access to all of those benefits. So in that way, once they've arrived to Michigan, they are kind of seen for all intents and purposes as a refugee. It's okay. No worries. There are some distinct immigration pathways that are worth just briefly mentioning. You might hear the word SIV thrown around. Many Afghans who worked with the U.S. military in some capacity have either received their SIV status or are in the process of receiving that status, but again, for all intents and purposes, they still have the access to the same benefits. They can just get their green card a little bit faster. Other Afghans were given the designation of humanitarian parole. The word parole is a little bit of a misnomer. It sounds like they were in trouble and then released from jail. That's not quite what it is. It's just a legal status that the U.S. used, that they had as a legal remedy to have people be able to be here. So most people in that situation will be seeking asylum, which if anyone knows anything about the asylum process in the U.S., that's a little bit messy. So stay tuned for how that all pans out. And then we will probably start to see Afghan refugees arriving through the traditional refugee pathway that we would be familiar with, like when we had Congolese coming, or the Burmese population, Bhutanese, all of those other populations who came as traditional refugees. Afghans will probably start to come in that same way. So the reason, or kind of backing up a little bit, the U.S. had all these Afghans here and then kind of had to decide what they were going to do with them. So they created a new program called the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program that very much mirrors the traditional refugee program that gives people support for 90 days after they arrive to the U.S. So it's essentially the same thing. Resettlement agencies were tasked with implementing the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program. So here in Kent County, Bethany Christian Services and Samaritas both were operating this program. I briefly touched on this already, but just wanted to confirm that Afghans are eligible for all of the same services as other refugees through the Extending Government Funding and Delivering Emergency Assistance Act that was passed, I think, back in September. So I have a report from the state of Michigan that may have been circulated. If not, I can make sure that you have the link to that report to send out for anyone who is interested. But the state of Michigan just released kind of an update on the status of Afghan arrivals. And in Kent and Ottawa County, we have had 340 people come from September until the end of February. So that's a lot of people. In the state of Michigan, between September and February, the number of arrivals that we had was more than we had in the entire 2020-2021 fiscal year for all refugees. So we essentially packed in 2 years of what we were used to into like several months. So when they say that the refugee team was very busy, yes, they were very busy. We're very thankful for them. All right, so now I'm just going to go over some misconceptions that you maybe have about people from Afghanistan. That's okay. The reason why we're talking about it is because they are common misconceptions. So this is just an opportunity to kind of retrain yourself and rewrite the narrative of what it means to be from Afghanistan. Before I even talk about misconceptions, I do just want to preface the rest of this presentation by saying whenever you're giving a cultural overview, you have to recognize that you can't put anyone in a box. So the things that we're talking about today are kind of generalizations. I'm very thankful that we had a staff member, Freshta, who helped put together this presentation, who is from Afghanistan, and then have Samir with us today, who can kind of give us more context to speak to what they want you to know about being from Afghanistan. But just like you couldn't take an hour to explain what it means to be from the US, you can't really explain in an hour what it means to be from Afghanistan. So let's make sure that we're treating everyone as an individual, but hopefully this will give you some more context and framework as you're working with people. All right, so misconceptions. A lot of people say that Afghanistan is in the Middle East, which we'll talk about in a second. Another misconception is that the language is Arabic. And again, I'm not saying if you've thought these things, this is not to belittle you. A lot of people think these things. A lot of people think that Afghanistan is a desert and that there are a lot of camels roaming around and it's just a very dry area. Unfortunately, a lot of people think maybe subconsciously even, that Afghanistan is an extremist Muslim country where everyone holds extreme views. And then a lot of people also tend to hold maybe an unknown, deep-seated belief that Afghanistan is the birthplace of terrorism. So those are some misconceptions. Let's now talk about some of the realities or counterpoints for this. So the Middle East is actually West Asia. So Iraq, Iran, those are more Middle East. Afghans themselves consider themselves from Central Asia. They actually have a term where they call themselves the heart of Asia. So they kind of take pride in being the heart, both geographically as well as kind of emotionally, the heart of Asia. They have two national languages, Pashto and Dari, as well as some other languages as well that we'll talk about later. They do have all 4 seasons. So most people from Afghanistan have encountered snow. Maybe not lake effect snow from Michigan, but it is not most of their first time seeing snow. It is 75% mountainous and then 25% plains. So they certainly are not just one big desert. It is religiously diverse, though about 99% Muslim. And most of the terrorism that is associated with Afghanistan is all foreign-sponsored terrorism that has come into the country through invasions. So something else that's really important just to kind of keep for a framework. All right, so now I'm going to pass it off to Samir to talk a little bit about the history of his country.
Thank you, Kathleen. So, as Kathleen said, like it's not in Middle East, it's not a desert. It's in heart of the Asia, and because of that, people call it like it's the center of the trade in the region. There was a Chinese traveler like back in 130 BC who was tasked by the Chinese Empire, and he goes to the area, and then he ends up with there's a province, we call it Mazar-e Sharif, Balkh, and he finds that there's a big market, and he calls like shrewd traders, like very smart traders are there. So it means that it's been a spot for a trade in the region before like 130 years back before the crest. So it was a trade route, and the famous Silk Road is also crossing through the country. But unfortunately, because of its geographical location and also the neighboring countries, it was invaded multiple times by the superpowers of the time, like Persians, also Greek, Arabs, and Mongols, Sikhs, and also Mughals, and finally by the British, like back in 80s and then all the way to 90s. We had like 3 wars with British, and then the proxy war, which started like back in 2001 by NATO and US. So this is how this country has been gone through, unfortunately. Kathleen, would you like to go for this?
All right, so we'll talk a little bit about demographics next. So something that is important to understand really about most countries outside of the United States is that they're very multi-ethnic. So the country has many different ethnic groups that make up Afghanistan. Samir will talk about some of the specific ethnic groups, but there are pretty stark distinctions between the groups, maybe even more so than some of the other populations that you might be used to working with. And those groups hold pretty diverse ideologies on how they view the world, how they interact with one another. And then those ethnic groups have a history of interaction between the groups as well. So that's something else that Samir will kind of outline a little bit for you, is just how Afghans might be perceiving each other within the larger umbrella of being an Afghan. Again, it's also important to realize that there are multiple religions, Islam and other, and then within Islam there's also multiple sects that can kind of determine how people are engaging with one another and how they live out their faith and interactions. It's also multilingual. So as I mentioned earlier, there is Dari and Pashto as the main 2 languages in the country. Some people speak both, most don't, I would say. So you shouldn't assume that because someone's from Afghanistan, they speak both Pashto and Dari. Same with reading. It's not the same. If you can speak Dari, you can't necessarily read Dari, or definitely not Pashto. So that is something to keep in mind. A common question asked is Dari the same as Farsi? And the answer is yes and no. Similar to British English and American English. So you can understand each other as you're talking. There might just be a few phrases that are different. So in the US, I would say I'm going to the bathroom, whereas you might say I'm going to the loo if you're in the UK. So you would be able to communicate. There might just be a few phrases. Last night I was at a home visit and the word hanger was different between Farsi and Dari. So they were kind of trying to figure that out. But most things are the same. They can understand each other. And then Pashto is very distinct from that. And then most people can speak one of those 2 languages, but there are some that speak other languages. There's many. I don't know if you know offhand how many languages there are.
I would say like 4 main languages.
4 main languages? Okay, yeah. So 4 main languages. I have found that in a lot of situations, the men will speak at least Pashto or Dari, but some of the women who maybe were in a more rural area, didn't end up going to receive any education, or weren't as exposed to traveling, only speak one of the lesser known dialects. So that can be complex when you're thinking about interpretation and trying to get an interpreter that people understand without having to have the partner be that conduit. All right, so I think it is very helpful to understand a little bit more about the different ethnic groups. So Samir is going to be much better equipped to speak to that, so I'll let him explain.
Thank you, Kathleen. There are different ethnic groups, but the majors are like Pashtuns, Tajik, Hazara, Turkmen, Uzbek, and Baloch. And we got like a percentage of them, though we don't have any kind of formal census for the past couple of decades, but this is what we got from the World Atlas. And it says like Pashtuns are like 42% of the total population. Tajiks are 27%, and then we have Uzbeks. Uzbeks are like 9%, and then Hazara, and the rest there are like minor groups. Let's say Baloch, 6. 6 are like Indian people who wear like the turban thing. And we also have like some other, we call it Gujar, so they're kind of like indigenous tribal people. So this is how the ethnic composition in the country is. Then we go to the next slide, which is culture. So being an Afghan, it's kind of a pride for every Afghan. I don't know what's the philosophy behind this, but it might be because the world superpowers invaded Afghanistan in the past decades and let's say centuries, but all of them were defeated. This might be the case. That's why they call them like, we are Afghan, we are brave, and probably the other reason could be like, I learned in a paper which says like people who are living like in mountains, they're kind of like harsh, like strong. So that's why they feel that they are brave, they are fighters, and nobody can conquer them. Also, it's a kind of a collective society. We have extended families. We don't have system like here, like when you get to 21, your child should leave. So we live all together. The brothers, even when they get married, when they have children, we got big houses. We all sit together, we eat together, and if it's a family is a bigger family, then the males they eat together, and then the female eat together. Males are served first, and then females are served. I don't know why they do it like this, but this is how things work there. We also have our national anthem. We call it Surudi Milli, and that's in Pashto language, and that's kind of a pride as well for the Afghans, which gathers all the ethnic groups, the languages, the religions in the country. But unfortunately, it's now no longer in use because it's a new era, new people, and new kind of system. We also have like ethnical and also tribal dresses, like as we see in the slides. Those are more kind of like occasional clothings people normally don't wear, like let's see the boy and the girl who are in the picture when they have like a wedding, or if there is a kind of a special ceremony, so they wear those kind of clothes. Also, the girls that we see, so this is specific to a certain part of the country where the kids wear this kind of clothes, but it's kind of not a normal clothing, but it's traditional when there is an event, so they wear such kind of clothes. We also have music. We love music, and there are festivals. New Year used to be like some 10 days celebration back in the years, but now it's just 1 day or 2 days. We also have a national dance. We call it Atan. That is kind of like a big, people dance in a big circle, male and female together, and they make a circle, and they kind of have a like special kind of actions and movements and stuff. Yeah, kite flying is really famous in the country. So people love kite flying, and we have a special season for this, which is right now, like the spring. So everybody go, like since it's a mountainous country, people go to the hillsides and they fly kites. Sports, we also love sports. And our national sport is, we call it Buzkashi, this thing. And it's played with horses, and there is a goat which is filled with some kind of dried grass. I don't know what do we call it in English, but literally it would be like dried grass. And so they have like a circle, and there are two teams, and they try to take this goat and put it in that circle, and then they make scores. We also play football. You guys call it soccer, so we have football as well. Yeah, we also have holidays. The next slide, please. We have many holidays, but these are the major holidays. We have Nowruz. Nowruz is the New Year, which was just recently on 21st March. And our year is, we followed the solar year, which is 1401. It just turned 401. We also have Eid al-Fitr. It's a kind of a Muslim thing, and that is celebrated after observing 30 days of Ramadan, which starts May 2nd, I guess. And then we will have the Eid, and that's for 3 days. So what happens on Eid occasion? So everything is off, like let's say the New Year here, and people go to each other's house. We have we call it the sarkhan. It's a kind of a tablecloth that has like different kinds of dried fruits, fresh fruits, and the tradition is like the youngers, let's say, they go and they respect the elders. They kiss their hands of the elders, and then the elders, they give money to the kids and girls and boys. We call it Eid. Yeah, and then we have the Eid al-Adha. That's we call it beggar Eid, and that's when we slaughter an animal. That is for 4 days, and that happens on the 10th day of the 12th month of the Islamic calendar, which coincides with the Hajj. That is the pilgrim thing that our Muslim people go to Mecca. They do that kind of prayers there. And then we also have Ashura. It's specific for a sect of the Muslim community. We got like Sunni Muslims and we got Shia Muslims, and then this Ashura thing is just for Shia Muslims. And we also have the independent days, though we were not conquered, but our, let's say, political affairs were controlled by the British back in, let's say, early 90s. And then our King Amanullah Khan, he got the independence in 1919, August. So we also celebrate that day with pride. And then we got the food on next slide. Afghans love food, you know. When you visit their houses, so they serve a lot of foods. Tea is must. Tea is something that there's no way you have to drink tea while visiting Afghans, but they do offer, like, let's say if it's a lunchtime, then they offer you lunch. If it's a dinner time, they offer you dinner. And we have this tarhan thing that I mentioned earlier. It's a kind of a bigger tablecloth, and we usually eat on the floor. We don't eat on the table. We don't eat with spoons. We eat with hands. And I think there's kind of scientific thing behind eating on hand, that it has kind of benefits compared to eating on spoons. We eat halal meat. That is kind of a clean. I think in Christianity we also have a word for it. I don't know what said it, but kosher. Kosher. Okay. So that's what we prefer. We usually have that halal meat. We have lots of rice, potatoes, tomatoes, beans, plant-based meat, and also naan and tea. Naan and tea is just bread with tea. That's a kind of a normal thing of everything. And another interesting thing about the Afghan food is that the plain bread, or let's say the bread, it's over 50% of our daily diet. So we eat a lot of bread. Yeah. And then we have the haram thing. That is something not allowed in Islam. Especially we call it, like, let's say, alcohol, the meat that is not, an animal that is not slaughtered through the, let's say, the Islamic way. And then we don't eat pork. So yeah, if you encounter any Afghans, they don't eat pork. They don't drink alcohol, but there are some people, they do drink alcohol, even being a Muslim. And also they do not eat uncleanly processed animals. Next slide, please. Then we have religion. So broadly speaking, it's a Muslim country. 99% of the population, they are Muslims. we got Sunni Muslims and we got Shia Muslims. We also got another small kind of a sect in Shia Muslim. We call it Ismailiya. We also got Sikhs. Sikhs are the people migrated from India. We also got Hindus. We also got Christians in Afghanistan. And we also got Baha'is, and there are some other minor religious groups as well. And then within the Muslim community, 80% of our population, they are like Sunni Muslims, and the remaining, they are Shia Muslims. Mannerisms. The next slide, please. There are differences among the ethnic groups back in Afghanistan, like how they interact, how they meet people. Pashtun people, they usually prefer hugging each other and then shaking hands. What I saw in States here, like if you're kind of close or if you love someone, so you hug him, but then finally do not shake hands. And in our case, when we hug each other, then we also shake hands. So that is something that personally I experienced. So that is normal back in Afghanistan. But with Tajiks, they prefer kissing each other. They hug each other. If it's a male to male, female to female, they hug each other and then they kiss each other. Not a one kiss, multiple kisses. So yeah, the right hand is the right way to let's say shake hands, not the left hand, and that's normal everywhere. And the common verbal greeting, it's salam or assalamu alaikum. That's an Arabic word which means peace be upon you. Some people say it like in complete form, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, that Arab people say, and that is kind of a big phrase, but in a shorter form, it's just say salam or salamu alaikum. The handshake between male and female, it's kind of impolite thing. So unless if it's a father, brother, husband, no one else handshake with the female. Yep. Yeah, and then we have next slide, and Kathleen will talk about that.
All right, so you have a lot of information now about Afghan culture, but how does that then translate to how you interact with this population? So hopefully we can talk through some best practices, some tips that will help you as you're doing home visits or having people come here to the health department. The first thing that I think is important is just to not make assumptions. So you don't want to necessarily, you definitely don't want to assume, like what Samir was just talking about, that as a female it would be okay for me to shake a male's hand. You also don't necessarily want to assume that they're not comfortable with that. Sometimes there's big distinctions from people living in rural areas versus people who have been living in the capital and have been more, or who were working with the US military maybe and have been more exposed to Western culture. So just don't make assumptions. I always follow the client's lead. So as a woman, I never will extend my hand to shake a man's hand, but if a man initiates a handshake, then I would reciprocate that. I wouldn't reciprocate a hug, but I just in general don't hug my clients. I guess that may be a health department rule or a personal preference, but so then yeah, thinking about male-female interactions, something else that's important to think through is generally the male is considered the person who you would be talking to most. If you're in a context where you're talking to a husband and a wife, the male is kind of looked to as the leader of the family. And so in some ways it is helpful to respect those roles that the family has established while also figuring out how to engage the woman in the conversation and making sure that she has a place and a voice as well. So to make sure that you're including everyone but respecting the roles that they have established as a family can be important. It is helpful, we'll talk about this a little bit with the health interactions, but it is helpful if you are a woman or if you have the opportunity, if you're meeting with a woman, to have a woman provider go, or vice versa, if you're meeting with a male and there is a male provider available, to keep those genders the same. Home visits, I know several of you are in home-based programs and might be going out into the community to do a home visit. Something that is helpful to keep in mind is that shoes are most often considered impolite to be worn into the home, especially if it's carpet. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a gray area if it's like a wood floor, but you'll generally want to take your shoes off. So I'll usually, like if I'm wearing flats like I am today, I'll usually keep a pair of socks in my bag that I can throw on to go into someone's home. If you ask, they will often say, oh no, it's okay to keep your shoes on, but keep in mind that they do pray on the floor, and it's kind of considered unclean if someone walks in with their street shoes and is walking on the floor that they'll then pray on. So you do want to take your shoes off. Tea, we've already mentioned a few times, and you may have experienced, you will most likely be served tea. Some who have been here longer have kind of started to get the hint that maybe we don't always accept it, but in general, it'll be offered, and it's important for you all to know what your rules are as an organization, if you're allowed to accept it or not. I would say if you are allowed to accept it, it would be good to accept the tea. Keep in mind that different regions have different types of tea, so depending on what region someone is from, they might serve you green tea, black tea, or milk tea. So keep that in mind too if you have any intolerances that milk tea, and it probably will not be oat milk that they are serving in their milk tea. And then there'll also be usually some kind of charcuterie of assorted nuts and dry fruits. And then they'll usually throw in some kind of like American treat as well. Last night, someone fed me a Three Musketeers. So they're kind of blending the cultures a little bit, but that's something else to kind of think about too as an organization, or maybe talk through as a program. What are we allowed to accept? What are we not? Samir mentioned they'll probably offer you meals as well if you're there during a lunch or dinner time. So that's something that you just kind of need to have clear expectations on. I'll always default to, at the end of the day, if you're not allowed to, I always say blame Bethany, so blame the health department. If you're not allowed to eat dinner with them, just say, oh, I wish I could, but my program or my agency doesn't allow that, and they'll usually accept it. And then they do, as Samir said, usually sit on the floor instead of sitting at a table. So sometimes I'll even conduct my home visits on the floor. Kind of depends on what their preference is and where they want to sit, but that is something common. If you go into a home and they don't even have a table, it could be because they declined one. It's not necessarily that they haven't been offered what we would consider essential furniture in Western culture. It's important to ask thoughtful questions. This is something that's common with many other cultures, but a lot of cultures outside of the US are yes cultures. So they want to show respect. And so oftentimes, if you ask a question like, did you understand me? Their answer is yes. Or, do you want me to take my shoes off? Oh, no, don't worry about it. They want to show respect to you. And so sometimes in doing so, their first answer might not be the heart of what you're looking for. So to be cognizant to ask more thoughtful questions that might not elicit just an immediate yes because they think that's what you want to hear. This is not an attempt to deceive you. This is an attempt to show hospitality and kindness to you. So part of engaging with this population, as in any other population, is to build trust so that they feel confident to talk to you honestly. We have been talking about people from Afghanistan and referencing or using the term Afghan as we talk about them. That's the preferred word to describe someone from Afghanistan. They're not Afghani. That's a type of currency. So we don't want to see someone as a dollar amount. They're not Afghanistanian, they're Afghans. I will say, I have heard people from Afghanistan say Afghani in reference to themselves, so this is one of those situations where follow their lead, but we've been told that the proper thing to do would be to say Afghan. Something else that's important to think about as you're interacting is to dress professionally. They see professionalism as very important. In the US, we've kind of started to move away from that a little bit and move more towards casual dress. At Bethany, we can wear jeans. Now it seems like that's kind of the case here as well. Not saying that you can't wear jeans if you're interacting with someone from Afghanistan, but they do kind of associate your knowledge and your expertise with how you present yourself. So kind of what you're wearing, your demeanor, they hold a lot of value in that. So that would be something to consider as well, is how you're dressed. And then I think modesty is something else that's important to consider as well. We don't necessarily advise that women would cover their heads when they're going to meet with a family, but just kind of keeping in mind, maybe avoiding lower cut clothes or really tight clothes, but usually that's common professional wardrobe anyway, but important for this population as well. All right, so then let's move on to some specific health considerations. So in kind of different conversations I've been a part of with clients, with Samir, and then with some other trainings, this is kind of a compilation of just some things that we've learned over the last few months. Something important to know is that Afghans hold doctors in high regard. They have a high respect for doctors, sometimes to the point where self-determination is not as important to them. So, oh, my doctor told me, so no questions asked, whereas we would kind of be patient first, you know yourself. So keep that in mind. If you say you're from the health department, they will see you as a medical professional, and they will often, or could just take what you say at face value without analyzing it more. So just be careful, you have power in that way. We already talked about this, but as much as possible, it is good to keep same gender interactions, especially if you're going to do any kind of physical examination that would require taking off clothes or touching. We want to keep same gender. There is a sense of respect, like I've talked about, with the medical hierarchy. So doctors are well respected, and then nurses are essentially less respected or seen as less knowledgeable. And so we've had a lot of our clients give some feedback to us that they went to the doctor, but they didn't actually see the doctor, so they need another appointment because they didn't get a chance to actually see the doctor. So here we know that that's just kind of the reality. I actually met my PCP for the first time last month after being established with this office for like 2 or 3 years, because I'd always just seen the nurse practitioner. So this is more of a health education opportunity. I'm not saying that suddenly none of them can ever see a nurse when they go to the doctor, but just something to keep in mind, that they have that framework, that they're kind of thinking through, oh, did I receive quality care because I only saw a nurse? And we would say, yes, we have highly skilled, trained nurses who are very competent, but they might not be there yet in their understanding. Afghanistan is similar to some other contexts in which it's much more of a generalist framework when they go to see the doctor. So when they go, usually they're going to the doctor because something bad has happened. There's not much preventative care necessarily, and when they go, they talk about everything. Whereas we know in the US, we have a specialist for every part of the body. So sometimes there's some education that needs to happen about, I'm from the maternal infant health program. I'm here to talk about your newborn baby. I can't evaluate your eye. That's not my role. Or someone might have a dentist appointment and they say, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the doctor, so I'm gonna tell them about my leg pain. And that's an opportunity to just explain. The dentist is highly qualified, very competent at talking about your teeth and your mouth. just because he doesn't know about the leg doesn't mean that he or she is not qualified, but just explaining those specializations is helpful. Something that Samir shared that I think is really helpful is that to understand associated with medication norms is that it sounds like prescriptions are very common just to prescribe a lot of medications, both volume and quantity. So they're used to having a medical problem and being prescribed maybe multiple medications, and that's kind of the solution. So in their mind, that is what good healthcare is. And I'm not here to make a statement about what is good or bad healthcare, but in general, they could be perceiving, if they're not getting prescribed medications or not being prescribed a lot of medications, that they're not receiving quality care. So it's another point of education, perhaps, is in the US, if you have pain, our first step might be physical therapy. And after physical therapy, it might be X, Y, or Z instead of just prescribing 5 or 6 medications right away. So something else to keep in mind. I'm happy to hear that our tobacco expert, I think that was you, is here. So I asked Samir, what are some maybe like health considerations that might not be on the forefront of our mind to be asking about? And he said that a lot of people will use snuff tobacco. So that may be something you want to brush up on a little bit about what snuff tobacco is. It's a little bit different than chewing tobacco. It's made of finely ground like tobacco leaves. So that's something that people commonly use. I have seen it quite a bit within the population here in West Michigan, so it is definitely something that's being utilized and worth asking about if you're doing a health evaluation. There are some beliefs about vaccinations that are important to understand as well. In general, my experience has been that they have been pretty receptive to vaccinations, but the US government also said that it was required for them to be here. So it was kind of a little bit of a forced process. So they have been compliant more or less, but there are some beliefs that vaccinations cause infertility. And some hold beliefs that that was a specific tactic from the West to reduce the expansion of Islam. So some people do hold those beliefs that it is a tool used to make people purposely infertile. So that's, I think, very important for you all to kind of have as a frame of reference is one, these people have essentially been forced to be vaccinated to be here, and two, they do sometimes hold those beliefs and might need some education about vaccinations and the risks and how the infertility might not be as much of a risk as they're thinking. Something else that's been a little bit of a buzz if you've been following Afghan medical news in the US is that many times when a baby is born, they will use a cosmetic eyeliner on the newborn baby. It's a cultural custom that I have seen with all of our new babies. They have been utilizing this custom. And Samira, maybe we'll have you pop up here at the end and explain a little bit about why they do that. It's more than just like a beauty thing. I think there are some other beliefs associated with it. So if you see a baby that has eyeliner on it, it is very much a cultural expression. With that being said, there are some risks. Some of the common brands that are used for that do have lead in it. So it is important to, if you see that, to ask the family, maybe if you could take a look at what they're using and just confirm that it is safe for the baby to use. Obviously, we want them to express their culture, but want to make sure that they know if they are using a product that could potentially be dangerous for their baby. All right, so I think we have a little bit of time to talk about women's rights, and then that Samir will explain, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, so that eyeliner thing, besides the, let's say, cultural beliefs and doing it for the newborn, there's also a belief that medically it's good. I'm not a doctor, but they use it. I don't know why, but when a child is born, they apply that thing. I think it's a stone thing, and then it's grounded. I don't know its exact name in English, but I know in my own language we call it ranjo in Pashto. And they say like when the baby burns, so they need to have those things. I don't know why, but yeah. So both kind of cultural and also medical beliefs are there. So we discussed and we talked like Afghanistan was invaded. Probably you guys might be seeing and hearing that Afghanistan is kind of a terrorist country, but it's not. There are some beliefs that it was maybe second or third nation-state country in the world back maybe hundreds years of back. But when actually things started and documented, we started printing back like in early 1990s, and that was something that started in Europe, Italy, like in 1700. And then we were lucky that we also got the printing facility in early 90s. And then our king, Amanullah Khan, who got the independence from British, his era is famous for women's rights, and we call it that in his time there was a decade of democracy, because he allowed the political parties, political movements, and also he created laws that supported the women's rights. He also abolished forced marriages, child marriages, bride prices, and also put restriction on polygamy. You know, in Islam, it's allowed to have 4 wives, but he kind of put restriction on that. And then we had Nur Muhammad Taraki, the other president back in 1965 till 1979. He was a kind of a pro-Russian regime, his regime, and he also created a movement for women's rights. So yeah, there are a lot of struggles were there back in early 90s. And then comes the Mujahideen area when they overthrew the Russian-supported regime back in 1990s, and they put in place like restriction on women, the hijab thing and other stuff. And then in 1996, when Taliban came for the first time, they introduced a lot stricter rules for women, even not allowing them to go to work, go to school, travel alone. And then that thing ended back in 2001 when the US and the NATO, they overthrew the Taliban regime. So for the past 20 years, somehow we practiced again some kind of democracy, but unfortunately back in September or August, again, things turned to what we were experiencing like 20 years back. With this, I think our presentation ended. And if you have any question, me and Kathleen would be happy to respond. Thank you.